Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy. I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. And it's customary where I come from to let you know that I have a home group. It's called a Design for Living group. I have a sponsor, a service sponsor, a lot of guys, but most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on March 28, 1987. So, extremely grateful for this way of life, and I really want to thank Steve for the invite. I thank the committee for all the hard work. We always say it, if it looks easy, it's because there's a lot of hard work that goes on behind these things. So I just want to give it up for the committee one more time. I love Steve and I trust Steve with my life, but I got to tell you, 2 years without lighting a candle, I was a little nervous up here. So I have 3 bottles of water, and just in case, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But it just feels great to be down here. This is about the 7th, 8th time I've been at this conference, and I love this conference. It's you guys just make us from the north feel pretty good about ourselves when we come down here, so thank you so much. I called my sponsor yesterday, and I told him how nervous I was about coming here. You haven't had a conference in 2 years. I'm the first speaker of the weekend. I was hoping that he would give me some encouraging words. Bob B. from St. Paul, Minnesota, many of you guys know him, and Bob's a little gruff, a little rough around the edges at times, and he said, "Don't worry, Katie's speaking." I'm like, all right. Oh yeah, Carl's speaking, and Sheldon, and John E., and Amy's speaking, so you'll be fine. And I'm like, great. He goes, just pray. So, as we all know in Step 11, it talks about you never pray for your selfish ends. Well, I did this time. I know it's a waste of time and it doesn't work like it says, but I prayed not to bomb tonight, If I'm going to bomb, let it be on a Zoom meeting in the middle of the night where those 9 out of 10 people have their videos off, So on February 26, 1958, I was born perfect, and I was quickly handed over to these 2 character defects called Mom and Dad. And I say that in a joking way, but the truth of the matter is I'm just that type of guy. I come to you from New Jersey, just to give you a little idea of where I'm from. I'm 60 miles south of New York City. I live on the ocean with my wife, Mary Beth, beautiful area. The locals like to call it the Irish Riviera. Members of Alcoholics Anonymous like to call it cirrhosis by the sea. There's a lot of drinking. There's a lot of partying between Memorial Day and Labor Day. It's just one big party down on the beach, so it's a great place to grow. But, I grew up in this family. I grew up in northern New Jersey. I grew up in a very blue-collar neighborhood. Everyone's a cop. Everyone's a fireman. Everyone's a union worker. There's not much education going on. Matter of fact, from an early age, I've been a kid that's been on the streets from a young age, and I'm not too bright, but if you were driving down Broad Street in Nashville, the main, yeah. If you saw me and my friend Darren out there in front of one of your honky tonks, and you drove by and you said, "Hey, there's a dead bird," me and him would look up. I mean, we're not too bright, And that's how I kind of grew up, not too bright, But I grew up in this in this family, and I grew up in a neighborhood where the only requirement for membership in the neighborhood was 5 or more kids, and there were so many kids, and there was so many things going on in the year. I'm 64 years old. There was so many things going on in my neighborhood at that time with all these kids, confirmations, communions, graduations, you name it. There was a party for everything, and the thing that was always at all these parties was obviously King alcohol. And from an early age, we hear that saying all the time, the disease of perception. The way I see things as a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old is that alcohol equates to fun. Alcohol equates to problem solved. Alcohol equates to freedom, because I would see the change that would happen to the men and the women who would start drinking at these parties all the time. And again, I'm not dying to get out and start drinking again, but it looked attractive to a guy like me, I'm a kid that plays a lot of ball, and back then, living in the city, you play in the schoolyard, so walking up to the schoolyard, I live in a neighborhood where there's a bar on every corner, and, I'm walking up to the schoolyard, and I look in that bar, and what do I see? I see you guys in there, I see you playing pool, watching a ball game, shuffleboard, all those things. I see all you beautiful women in there trying to pick up these guys in there, Again, I can't wait to do that stuff, Well, one of the things I witnessed early on, and it was with my dad. My dad was cunning, baffling, and powerful in his own way. My dad was a real tough guy. My dad was a Korean vet. He was just a guy that was angry about everything in life, and either he drank at it or he got angry at it, But what I would witness as an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, is the ease and comfort that comes at once by taking that first drink. And my dad would take that first drink, and all of a sudden things would be different. Every night my mom would make these two pitchers, one called martinis, the other one called Manhattans. And my dad would be walking into the house, and being a butcher, they wear those white coats, and there's a lot of blood on those white coats sometimes, And sometimes I'd be thinking about my father. I would wonder, did he slaughter a cow today, or did he grab a guy at a red light? Because that's the kind of guy he was. He was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he was just a guy I feared immensely, I just never knew what was going to walk in the door. But on these particular days, my dad would take that first drink, and all of a sudden he became that fun guy. He became the guy that wanted to have a catch in the backyard. He wanted to be the guy that wanted to, tell some jokes. He became a different person like many of us do when we take that first drink. But don't let me fool you, because there was those nights. And those nights looked like something like this. My dad would take that first drink, and all of a sudden the plates would be flying across the kitchen. A kitchen chair would be flying across the kitchen, or one of us young kids would be flying across the kitchen, because my dad would erupt in this rage, in this anger, for no particular reason at all. It could have been anything, and my dad would just blow up. So from an early age, that doesn't make me alcoholic, but makes me very insecure about myself. Makes me filled with a lot of fear about myself. But most importantly, living in a house like that, there's a lot of secrets in my house. You see, I grew up with a code, and the code is this: nothing ever leaves your home. So, I walk out the door, and all of a sudden, I got that wall up. You're not coming in, and I'm not coming out. I'm protective of everything that's going on in my life, and I'm only 6, 7, 8 years old at this age, and I know this. This is ingrained in me, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not supposed to be talking about what's going on in this house. And as I joked around and say, these two character defects, mom and dad, all they ever wanted from me was to give me good morals, good values, and education. 20 years prior to me being carried through that threshold as a newborn baby, little do I know, 7 miles west, exactly 7 miles west from my front door in a city called Newark, New Jersey, at a place at 17 William Street on the 6th floor, there was an office, and in that office was called Honors Dealers. And 20 years earlier, there was two men writing a book. The book looks like this. One's name was Bill W., the other one was Hank P. And little did my parents know that it would take a book, it would take a plan of action, it would take you people to give their child the life that they always try to give. And it took a long time for that to occur. So, I always believe if we all look over our life, I believe we all have a moment when life changes, And my parents wanted something better for me, and at the age of going into 6th grade, whatever the age that is, 12 years old, my parents took me out of the public school system and they put me into the Catholic school system. And I got a resentment. I got angry at it because, this kid who is filled with insecurity, this kid who's filled with fear, this kid who's holding on to secrets, I have so much rage inside of me and I don't even know how to express myself. But what happens is my parents take me away from something that feels like an anchor. It feels a kind of safe. And they put me in this place where there's new rules, there's new regulations, there's religion, and there's these things called nuns. I don't know if anyone have had nuns in their life, but they're cunning, baffling, and powerful in their own way too. And I don't have the new age nuns. I got the old age nuns with the metal rulers and all that other stuff, and the habits, that stuff, right? You got to be old to know that. But I'll tell you when that moment changed. Going into 6th grade, into 7th grade, I have my first drink. 51 years ago. I can remember like it happened this afternoon. And I'm in a cemetery with 5 guys that I still remember to this day. And here comes that first bottle. It's called Colt 45 malt liquor. And I put my hand in that Colt 45 and I start drinking on that beer. Here comes that second bottle. It's called Mohawk Blackberry Brandy, and I start drinking on that Blackberry Brandy. I'm 13 years old, and I found a magic elixir. I found the answer to all my problems. Now, you might be saying, what kind of 13-year-old has problems? Apparently I do, and I'm sure some of you guys in this room do. I remember going to a wedding not too long ago with my wife, and we went to a friend that's in the program, and this is a second marriage. He had a 13-year-old daughter, and she had about 10 of her friends at this wedding, and they invited my 4th cousin who lives in their town. And so I pick up this kid and I bring him with me. I don't really know him that well, and I couldn't help but stare at him the whole night because he's 13 years old and he didn't even care. The hormones didn't kick in. He didn't care about the girls that wanted him there. He was playing that little Game Boy in front at a video game at this wedding. And all I could look at, and I was saying this to my wife, what was wrong with me? That kid looked like a baby, and I'm already drinking at that age. And what I'm drinking is to escape. And I don't know what I'm escaping. I don't know what I'm running from. I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know any of that stuff. I find that out when I land here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I get a sponsor, and I start to go through these steps. So here I am. I'm 13 years old, take my first drink, first night, puke purple for 2 weeks, blacked out, grounded for life, took a beating from my father, and the hook was in. The first piece of the three-legged stool was in my life, the physical allergy to alcohol, because what I could do, what I could tell you now, looking back with being positive, I'm alcoholic right out of the gate. And why I could say that is because I know what I'm up against. I understand the physical allergy. I understand once I take that first drink, the phenomenon of craving goes on in my life. And that's what it was like right out of the gate. Very quickly, the second piece of that three-legged stool got into place. And that was the obsession. The idea that's so strong and overcomes all other ideas. I can't wait to recreate what we just did Friday night. I can't wait till after the dance. I can't wait till after the football game. I can't wait to start drinking again and do what we just did 2 weeks ago, even though there was a price and circumstances to be paid. The hook was in. I loved alcohol right from the get-go. And basically what happened is for the next 16 years of my life, I stepped on a path that goes straight to hell. Because my drinking got progressive, but something else got very progressive, and that was my behaviors. And all of a sudden, I was doing a lot of things that my mom and dad never sat me down and talked about: how to rob a house, how to rob a car, how to do illegal activities, or any of that stuff. I just became a product of the street, because back then, in the 60s, maybe it was like that around here, your mom would open up the door and say, get out, and eventually they knew you'd come home at some point, and they knew you would eat at some place. But the point was that right from a young age, I got addicted to the streets. I got addicted to the people that looked very important in the streets. My brothers, my dad, the men in my life, they weren't very important to me. You know who was the most important guy to me? The neighborhood bookie. I would look at the neighborhood bookie with jealousy and envy, because that guy always had a brand new car. That guy always had a wad of cash with the elastic band around it, just like I have in my pocket right now. That guy... Still a wannabe a little bit, He always had a good-looking girl on his arm, and it's just a guy that I always looked up to. Everyone looked up to this guy. Another guy that was very important in the neighborhood was the neighborhood bartender. You can go to the neighborhood bartender and talk about anything in life, and he had the answer. You could have a medical condition and talk to your bartender, and he would know the answer. You didn't need to go to a doctor. And this is the kind of characters I grew up with. It was like, Tony Soprano and the guys, And, but it was a life that I just loved early on. And I loved the game, and I loved the chase, and I loved everything we did that went with alcohol. I went to a prep school. I was dressed like this on a daily basis. My mom worked at this prep school. She was the secretary to the principal for 30 years. And, my mom, the great enabler. She got me out of every jam. She got me out of jail. I can't even tell you how many times she did everything for me. And I like to tell just two stories that really have stood out in my mind lately about my high school. I mean, it's a long time ago. What does that have to do with today? Well, one of them was I was introduced to the morning drink. I was a basketball player that, liked to drink, obviously, and I got bombed out of my brains before a huge game, before this competition, not competition, but this team that we played from South Jersey. I was from North Jersey. We were both Catholic schools. And the night before, I got so drunk, I couldn't even see. And I got on the bus going to the game, and we drove down to the Jersey Shore where I live now. And I'll never forget, I sat next to a kid that's just like me, and he goes, "You know how you can get rid of that feeling that you're feeling right now?" I said, "How's that?" He goes, "You could start drinking all over again." Now, that never occurred to me. He said, "This is called the hair of the dog." The hair of the dog? I never heard of this. This sounds like a good idea. And so I start drinking, and I don't even know what I was drinking. Could have been a combination of about 1,000 things that he stole out of his father's liquor cabinet. But all of a sudden, I'm at this basketball game, and I am wasted, and the coach puts me in the game. I think Tim Highland's going to be here tomorrow. He's a big basketball player, and he kind of understands his story. So this guy gets a rebound, throws it to me at half court, and I take off on a fast break. Now, the problem without a fast break when you're drunk, there was 3 baskets, and I didn't know which one to shoot it at. So I go for a layup, and obviously I missed it, right? And my coach pulls me right out of the game. Now, why that story is so important in my life, it's because that's one of those kind of stories where I got angry at it. I felt humiliated. This kid who's filled with insecurity, this kid who's filled with secrets, this kid who's filled with fear, it just seems like everything I do just that's piled on top of that. It just gets me more rageful, gets me more angry, gets me more just, I can't wait to have another drink. Now, again, what happened very shortly after that was the thing that really changed my life in my school. I'm in a classroom one day, and one of the Jesuits came up to me, and he threw me out of the class because I was being a wise guy. And I was shocked that he would throw a guy like me out of the classroom. So I opened up the door and I said, "Father," and he came running at me. And when he came running at me, I reacted in a way that you shouldn't really probably react. And I grabbed this priest and I knocked him out. That's right, I knocked him out. I didn't go to hell, so it's not that bad yet. And I tell you that because it was the first time in my life that anger came out of me like that. It's the first time. I was probably 17 years old at the time. It's the first time that rage exploded out of me. Now, I wish I could tell you that that was the only time that ever happened, but that was just the beginning of it all. And what happened with that priest is that, he left the priesthood. He met a nun, and she left the sisterhood. They got married. They have like 10 kids now. And I remember writing my inventory the first time, and I wrote down on my inventory this priest's name, and I had to go make amends to him. And so I found where he lived, and it was only the next town over from me. And he's with his wife and these 10 kids, and I go over there, and he goes, "Before you have to say anything, I'd like to say something to you." And he starts making an amends to me. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, "Are you a member of AA?" And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "Me too. This is why I'm here, to make amends to you." But those were 2 pivotal things that, morning drinking became a common thing. And anger was a very common thing. So I get through high school. I go on to the greatest 10 years of my life. We call that college. I wish I could tell you I lasted 10 years, but I really lasted 1 year in school and I got thrown out. I went with 9 friends to a Jesuit college in Pennsylvania, and I got thrown out. And I'm 18, 19, 20 years old, and what's a kid to do? I have no education, I have no trade, I don't have a hook to get into a union job. And so I come home to New Jersey, and really what that starts is my everyday drinking in the corner bar. Thinking about goals, wanting some things to do in my life, having all those things that I want to be, but I don't know how to be because something goes on every day, and I take that first drink. And like many of us, I sit at that bar and I have all these dreams, aspirations, these goals. I want to be something. I want to do something. I'm not that dumb. I want to do something, but I order that first drink, and when I order that first drink, all bets are off. And I become that double-edged sword guy, that one side of me who blames everyone for what's going on in my life. I'm 22, 23 years old. I'm drinking on a daily basis. I'm getting in a lot of trouble. I'm getting locked up. I get out of the county jail. I go right back to the bar. I don't think there's anything. I don't even think drinking and getting locked up have anything to do with each other. I am totally delusional and denial of my drinking problem. But here I am. Like I said, I'm a double-edged sword guy, and all my friends are starting to move on in life. They're starting to get careers. They're starting to get women. They're starting to, they're starting families. They're doing things that I really want to do in my life, but I take that first drink. You see, I'm always searching for something out there, whether it's women, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's money, whether it's cars. It always has to be something out there that's going to make me feel better in here. I don't know what the answer is yet. And what happens to me is I'm in a bar one day and I see a pretty girl against that wall. And ladies, this is how I do relationships. I see a pretty girl against the wall. I grab my sister who's next to me. I say, "I'll buy you an illegal substance if you introduce me to her." She does. 7 months later, I'm married. And that's how I do relationships. Now, the problem with that is I don't like her. I don't like me. I'm irresponsible. I'm non-caring. I'm under the delusion that if I could just get married and settle down, I'm going to be okay. But see, what I don't understand is I have the inability not to drink. See, lack of power is my dilemma. I don't know that. No mental defense against that first drink. No human power is going to help me with this deal. And I don't know that until I land in and sit with you guys and learn about that stuff. But I get married to this woman, and she's a nice woman. She has a good job and all that stuff. But 4 months into the marriage, I take off from the marriage. Because you see, drinking's more important than being a married man. So I take off for Boca Raton, Florida, where I have a lot of friends, and I have a friend that has a very wealthy family, and I'm drinking around the clock. I'm 25 years old at this point. My life is going down the tubes. I have no money. I have barely anywhere to stay. It's not a pretty picture. And I get down to Florida, and somewhere along the lines, I believe that God just cracked my skull open, And in my skull, He put this chalkboard. And on this chalkboard, there was these three emotions: shame, guilt, and remorse. And it seemed like up to my first 25 years of life, everything I did or everything I tried to accomplish led to one of those things. The shame of not being a good husband, the shame of not being a good student, the shame of not being a good son or brother or, a sibling or a relative. The guilt of all the people I hurt with my behavior, the remorse of the crimes and all that stuff I committed and all the things that I put my parents through. I introduced my parents to a way of life they never even knew existed. My parents were good people, but I just resented them so much for being good people. It seemed like they were able to wear life like a loose garment, and it just seemed like they were able to go through things. My dad was a butcher. He sent 5 kids to major universities on probably $40,000 a year tops. How did he do that? How does he make this look so simple? And I didn't know the answer to that. But here I am in Florida. I'm riddled with this shame. I'm riddled with this guilt. I get that knock at the door every morning like we do. It's the 4 horsemen of terror, frustration, bewilderment, despair. I know the answer to that. We all know the answer to that. But you see, I'm at this point in my drinking at 25 years old. I don't even need to take that first drink. I just need to crack the seal of a bottle of Johnny Walker Red, because I know when that first drink does come, grandiosity's right around the corner. And I take that first drink, and here comes that perfect little kid. Now it's her fault. It's their fault. It's everyone's fault for the way I feel. And I just fall into the abyss again. And I just go deeper and deeper into my alcoholism, though I don't know it. And that's the delusion of alcoholism. You see, alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle. It comes in the mind. And my mind is filled with all sorts of delusions about what life should look like and who I should be and where I should be and all this stuff. But the problem is I take that first drink and all bets are off. And what happened eventually is I came back to New Jersey. But see, I'm so riddled with shame and guilt and remorse that I can't call anyone in my family for help. I can't call anyone. So I make a decision. That decision is to live on the streets. And for the next 19 months of my life, or the next 19 months of my life, I lived on the streets of northern New Jersey, going into lower Manhattan, jumping turnstiles, getting arrested for jumping turnstiles, getting locked up for a disorderly person, all this crime wave that I was on, and I just couldn't stop drinking. My existence was shattered by what was going on in my life, and I couldn't stop drinking. I didn't understand why I could not put the plug in the jug. And not that I was looking to do that, I just didn't understand that first drink will get me loaded. And I got in a lot of trouble, and, living on the streets is just, one night on the streets is one night too many. That's for sure. And what happened to me is, I would walk the streets. And, when I read those words, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, boy, that fit me to a T. That fit me to a T when I read that for the first time. Because you become a different person when you live on the streets. I broke down emotionally, I broke down psychologically, I broke down physically. I was mumbling words, I was panhandling, I was stealing, I was doing things that, if you told me this is what would happen to you, Jim, by drinking, I would not believe what you were going to tell me. But here I am, and I'm dying of this thing called alcoholism, though I don't know it. And one night I walk into a bar, and I walk into this bar, and there's an old-timer in the bar, and he says to me, "Hey, Jimmy, they're hiring guys like you at Newark Airport." Finally, being seen for my potential. Newark Airport, okay. There was an airline called People's Express back in the day. Maybe some of you old-timers know that, remember that airline. It's like $29 to get to Florida. I miss those days. But anyway, the job was really simple. The idea was to take all the luggage that was over there and put it on the plane that was over there. I'd like to segue here a little bit and just let you know that if you were flying through Newark Airport in the 80s and you're still waiting for your luggage, well, I can make amends after this meeting. Because I think half the luggage we threw into a dumpster because we didn't know what we were doing. Dying. I'm now 29 years old, living on the streets for 2 years, close to 2 years. No direction in life, nothing. And here I am, I've got a job finally that pays me a little bit of money. And for years I could not tell you how I really felt. I couldn't put words to how I felt like many of us can't. Until I landed in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and started to read our literature. For years I felt this feeling inside of me that I didn't know how to describe until I read Bill's story. When Bill spoke about his first step experience, no words could tell the loneliness and despair I felt in a bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I met my match. I've been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. And I remember sitting in a little metal chair like we sit in many little metal chairs in every church basement all over the place. And I remember sitting down and really internalizing that feeling, not knowing what those words were, but sitting there. And now, years later, thinking about that, the isolation and the loneliness of the alcoholic, sitting there. And as I sat there and I just wanted my life to end, a gentleman, a stranger, sat right next to me. And after a couple of minutes, this guy looked at me and said, "What's your problem?" And for whatever reason, well, I know the reason today, it's called God's grace, I spit my life story up on this guy in about 10 minutes. And he said, "I have the solution for you." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Where do you live?" I said, "I don't live anywhere." This is pre-cell phone, pre-beeper days. He pulled a piece of paper out and he wrote down a street. He goes, "You know where this street is?" I said, "Yeah, that's my old neighborhood." Put a number in front of that street. He goes, "Is it possible for you not to take a drink today?" I don't know. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. I want to drink right now. Try not to drink and be in front of that address at 7 o'clock tonight. And again, but for the grace of God, at 7 o'clock that night, I'm in front of 153 Linden Avenue. And my knees are knocking. And my belly's all upset. And I'm riddled with fear. And I'm almost at the delusional place because that's where I got to. It's so delusional. Did I even meet somebody today? Why am I standing in front of this house? That's where my state of mind was. When all of a sudden, a 1979 Chevy Impala pulls up, and the stranger was driving that car. And he had a bunch of other strangers in that car. And they pulled up in front of me, and they rolled down the window, and they said the most spiritual thing you'll ever hear in Alcoholics Anonymous. Get in the car. And they drove me around the corner. It was less than 300 yards to the front door of the Jersey City Young People AA meeting. And for years I thought it was bingo. Who knew? It was AA. You know? And they walked me into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was on March 28, 1987. And I've been with you guys ever since. And walking into grace doesn't feel like, thank you. Walking into grace doesn't feel like walking into grace. Feels like I was walking out of chaos. I didn't understand the enormity of what I was about to do, walking into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was my grammar school, that Catholic school that my parents put me in. And I remember walking down those metal stairs, and I could smell the paint to this moment, that battleship gray that every Catholic school in America paints their hallways with. And I remember walking down that staircase, and I was walking down a hall, and I looked in that cafeteria, and I remember being a 6th grader, a 7th grader, an 8th grader. I remember the goals and the aspirations and dreams I had to be something or be someone. But see, I took that first drink. And I didn't understand when I took that first drink, all bets were off. And I remember walking down that hall, and I started to smell, well, I like to call it coffee. Back then, and this is another thing for you, some of you young guys might have to Google some of this stuff. It was called Sanka. Anyone remember Sanka? It was something that the astronauts used to drink with Tang, I think. I don't know. But I could smell the coffee down the end of the hall. And then I met the most important person we'll ever meet in rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. We call him the greeter. And that man put his hand out to me, and I grabbed that flimsy reader, and he pulled me into the meeting, and he pulled me into you guys. And he sat me up front. He said, have a cup of coffee, pay attention. But what he gave me that night was probably the most important thing that we can give anyone that walks into the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. He gave me a piece of dignity that night. He didn't judge who I was. He didn't care that I smelled. He didn't care. Every other word was a profanity. He said, keep coming back, kid. Keep coming back. And on day one, that stranger who picked me up walked up to me and goes, I'm your sponsor, and this is your home group. So on day one, apparently I had a sponsor in a home group, and I don't even know what they are yet. We have a friend down in Florida. He calls, he says this statement a lot, the kindness of strangers. And what these old-timers did back then was just they didn't know the difference between a phone book and a big book, believe me. We didn't talk about the big book back then. But they just were kind men that went to any length to help somebody. And they knew that I had nowhere to stay. And so they put me up in a hotel. Well, that's a nice word. Motel, let's call it. In a motel. And they went to a department store. I don't know if you had them in the South. They were very popular in the North. They were called Two Guys Department Store. And they got me a bunch of pair of jeans, a couple of shirts, my first pair of Chuck Taylors. I see that Steve is still wearing his. And on day two, they picked me up, and I did something that I thought was so bizarre. I shared an emotion. Is that really that hard? For a street guy like me, tough guy like me, yeah, that's very hard. And when they picked me up that next morning, I went to this guy, Richie, my new sponsor, part of my new home group, and I said to him, Richie, I want a drink. He goes, I know you do. And this is what a trusted servant in Alcoholics Anonymous does. He called up his wife and said, take me off the calendar today. I'll be with this new guy. And he wound up taking me to 3 meetings that day. He fed me 3 times. I drank 700 cups of coffee throughout the day. I was flying around the rooms of AA, but I felt like a member of Alcoholics Anonymous right out of the gate. Day 7. I can remember these days like that happened this morning. Day 7, my new sponsor at my new home group walks out to me and goes, we're going to have a business meeting. Oh, another curveball. What's a business meeting? Just come to the business meeting. And he walks up to me and goes, listen, I want you to take a job. I said, what's the job? He goes, I want you to be the ashtray cleaner. Ashtray cleaner, huh? And in my mind, I said, you know what you could do with your ashtrays? And I had a perfect reason why. See, I've put every possible substance in my body, but I've never smoked a cigarette. So why do I have to clean ashtrays? I didn't get it. Thank God for that little intuitive, small voice that's in every one of us. Because probably for the first time in my life, I listened to that small voice. Because that small voice said, just trust him. He's trying to help you. Just trust him. I'll be the ashtray cleaner. From that moment, 35 years plus change, to this moment, right now, I've been tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous in my home group, in my area, in my district, through a commitment, through a job, through the third legacy of service. I've been connected to Alcoholics Anonymous like I never knew I would be. And it's because I listened to that small voice within. So what happened was I went on with my life. I got back with that wife eventually. That wife that I walked out, she took me back. She must be really nuts. She was going to Al-Anon. She was getting a little bit better. I was getting a little better. Things got very quickly for me, physically, mentally. I was getting better right away. We had those 2 little AA kids who were now going to be 33 and 30 on Friday and Saturday. I can't believe that. But, I had the house. I got a real job. I had money in my pocket. I had my first sober car, brand new car. I had everything you would think that a man or woman would want. And to the untrained eye, it looks like normal living is the solution to alcoholism. And at 5 years without a drink, I got the rope. I just need to jump off a bridge. Because I am dying of something that I don't even understand or even know that I'm dying from. We call that untreated alcoholism. And I was asked to give a talk on the second step. Now, I have no relationship with God. I don't even pray at this point. I'm 5 years in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Very active as a member in my home group, but I'm not doing everything you guys tell me to do. I don't drink. I go to meetings. I live under the delusion that abstinence is the solution to a spiritual malady. I had no idea. I have a sponsor that's very, a lot of 12-step calls. That was a popular thing. I don't know if you guys do that down here, but, 12-step calls were very popular back then. Or not, I don't want to say popular, they're in common. The old timers would call you up. It'd be 11 o'clock at night, 10 minutes downstairs, click. and he would come up with some excuse. I got to work tomorrow. Click, and what would happen is these two old-timers would get two of us young guys, and we'd go to someone's house. And they would tell us young guys, go look for weapons, go see if the wife's all right, see if the kids are okay, and then come into the living room. And when we came into the living room, we would watch the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. We'd watch those two old-timers 12-step drunk in his living room. And most times we would take them to a meeting, once in a while, detox, once in a while right to a treatment center. But that's what I grew up on, my early sobriety. Don't drink, go to meetings, and that kind of stuff. Activity, But at 5 years without a drink, I'm doing a talk on the second step. I don't believe in God. Matter of fact, I don't even know why this guy asked me, but I'm at a podium like this. I could tell a few jokes. I read the 12 and 12. I could throw some lines out. At the end of a meeting, we had the cha-cha line. Everyone's shaking your hand. This guy walks right up to me, eyeball to eyeball. He looks at me and goes, "You're screwed." A little bit saltier language. And I want to start a fist fight in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because I don't know how to face resistance with no resistance. I don't know how to face conflict without anger and violence. I want to start a fight in AA. But God does for me what I can never do for myself. I step back and I look at this guy, Bill Grace, from St. Paul, Minnesota, same place where my sponsor is from today. I look him in his eye. I'm 6'4". He was 6'4". I said, "You're right. I need help." I found myself that next afternoon in a rare road room apartment on the Jersey side of the Hudson River overlooking Manhattan. And I'm getting a spiritual test. Maybe the test that some of you guys have gotten at some point. He's asking me a few questions. First question he throws out at me, how long can you hold your breath? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? Well, apparently 5 years. What's your relationship with God look like? Well, I used to say I'm a good Catholic, but I'm a Catholic. I believe in God. But what does God have to do with this? What makes you alcoholic? As I stammer out of my mouth, I drink too much. I had no idea about the physical allergy. I had no idea about this mental obsession. Definitely had no idea about that thing that stirs the whole pot, the spiritual malady deep down within. Then he asked me a question that maybe some of you guys are not going to believe, but this is the way it was in my neighborhood in the 80s and 90s. He asked me where my big book was, and I looked at him and said, "What's a big book?" Now, I'm sure there was one at a podium or a lectern, as Howard would used to say, or a literature table. But we were never encouraged to open up the big book. It wasn't until Joe and Charlie came through the Northeast in the early 90s that everyone started to get lit up, and then we all became maniacs. This is what you're doing wrong. This is what you're doing wrong. This is what you better do this, I wasn't doing it, but you better do this, Then he asked me a question. He said, "Jimmy, if AA works, why do you have so many problems?" Because I'm not doing AA. I'm self-reliant. I'm filled with fear. I'm angry at everything. I'm still that 5, 6, 7-year-old kid. I got secrets galore in my stomach. I got insecurity galore in my stomach. I cover up my fear with anger and violence because that's what tough guys like me do. I don't want to talk about how I feel. I don't want to talk about my emotions. I don't want to talk anything. I'm holding on by a string in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then this guy, Bill Grace, starts to paint the picture for me. He said, "Jimmy, we have 2 goals in Alcoholics Anonymous. First goal is the obvious one. Don't pick up the first drink. The second goal is the one we all want to attain. And that's to step into the sunlight of the Spirit. In order to step into the sunlight of the Spirit, you're going to have to do a few things quite differently. And the sunlight of the Spirit is just a place. It's a destination. We could all get there. Because what we experience in the sunlight of the Spirit is the promises that the book talks about. We experience a relationship with the power of our understanding. We start to experience a freedom we never felt before. The bondage of self gets removed. We're free men, we're free women, but there's a price that has to be paid. And the price that has to be paid is that you need to walk through the darkness of your life and look at that stuff, or you'll never be a free man. One of the readings I love, and I read it all the time because I think it's one of the most important readings we have, comes out of Daily Reflections. And if you turn to May 1st, it says something like this: "It's the side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at the dark side in order to heal my mind and my heart, because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into darkness to find the light, and walk into fear to find peace." The way the old-timers used to say that is like this: Alcoholics Anonymous is like a big bonfire. Most people are just walking around the fire. Eventually the fire is going to burn out. If you really want to change, if you really want to go, if you really want to live in the sunlight of the Spirit, you need to walk through the fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. Are you willing? I was willing. And as I sit at my kitchen table for so many years with so many men that I sponsor, and I point to that glass door at the end of my hallway in the Jersey Shore, which is a beautiful area down by the beach, I tell them the same thing. That in order to be free, you got to walk through the darkness. And you got to do something that I thought was a weakness, but really it's strength in disguise, and I had to become vulnerable. I had to start talking about the secrets deep down inside of me. I had to start talking about the insecurity. I had to start getting down to causes and conditions of my alcoholism. Alcoholism is not in a bottle, it's in your mind. He would tell me that all the time. That my mind is filled with all sorts of delusions that I got to start smashing. It's my ego. Bill writes a wonderful paragraph in How It Works. We read it all the time. Said some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Why can't I let go? Why do I resist change? It comes down to one word for a guy like me. It's called pride. My pride doesn't raise my hand and say, hey, Darren, I need help. My pride doesn't go to my home group and say, hey, my life is falling apart. My pride will prevent me. My pride is the essence of my self-centeredness. And my pride will always justify every character defect that I have, and pride will always step into place when spiritual stagnation goes on in our lives. So you feel disconnected? The book talks about resentment being the number one offender. It kills more alcoholics. My experience is a little different. I think pride will kill an alkie quicker than a resentment. Because pride walks me right out that door. And without you, I'm useless. So I start to go through the steps with this guy. I start to understand what I'm up against. I start to read the doctor's opinion. Little do I know, Dr. Silkworth lives about 3 miles away from my house. How many times have I passed the Glenwood Cemetery and I see a bunch of people sitting in there on beach chairs? I'm like, that's kind of weird. Who sits on beach chairs in a cemetery? Apparently us, reading the doctor's opinion to each other. Right? Now I know. Another AA secret, But I started to understand about this phenomenon called craving. That I have no power, no choice, control inside of me once I take that first drink. But I also have no power, no choice, no control in my mind prior to that first drink. Nowhere in our AA literature to say that AA is about getting us to quit drinking says quite the opposite. You can't quit. Lack of power is your dilemma. You need to have a spiritual experience. You need to have a shift in consciousness. And the only way that was going to happen for a guy like me was to walk into the darkness of my life and to uncover, discover, and discard the things that have blocked me. Old-timers used to say this all the time. Alcoholism is a soul sickness caused by a separation from God and a disconnect from each other. I've had walls between me and you forever. I've had a wall between me and God forever. And it was time to bring the walls down. And so I got on my knees with this gentleman. I held his hands. I felt very weird holding another man's hands. I've been in 100,000 prayer circles after an AA meeting, praying the Lord's Prayer, praying the Serenity Prayer, third step, seventh step, whatever you want, whatever your group does. But this was different. Because I got on my knees and I held this man's hands. And I didn't know the prayer. He read the prayer, and I read it out of the book, and he said it. And I could feel his spirit come into my spirit. And when I got off, he gave me that time element of next. And I started to write an inventory for the first time, 5 years without a drink. And I started to get down to the things that will block me, all that anger that I had, all those resentments, all those conflicts. I started to look at all the fear that I have. I have a lot of fear. And then I started to look at all my sexual harm, financial harm, emotional harm, physical harm. There was a lot of harms in my life, and I got it all on paper. And then I shared it with this man for a very long talk. It was the most powerful day of my life, my original fifth step. Other than my 2 children being born, this was the most powerful day of my life. When my daughter was born, a doctor handed me my daughter, and he said, cut the cord, and my eyes broke open. Tears. I couldn't believe the love I had for another human being in that moment. I could feel God's love in that moment. And I could also feel that 3 years and 1 day later with my son. The same exact thing. And when I did that fifth step, not that it was so much love, but I felt an emotion. I felt something going on inside me that I'd never felt before, because I gave this man my life. And I told him everything, and I was positive as you could be, that I'll never walk through that archway a free man if I have secrets in my back pocket. So I gave them my life, and I trusted him. And then I took that hour like we all do, and I had the most powerful experience that you could imagine. I went to this place. I didn't go home, put the book on the shelf, and take it down. I went to this place called Liberty State Park that overlooks Manhattan from the Jersey side. And I walked out on the pier, and I opened my book to page 75, and I read those directions. Are the stones properly in page? Thank God for the first 5 steps, blah, 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 right? And all of a sudden, tears start coming down my eyes. And when I look to my right where that wall is down there's the Statue of Liberty right in front of me. I looked across the river right in front of me, right at that back wall. There's the World Trade Center. And then I looked to my left, and there's Ellis Island, symbols of freedom. And here I sat as a 32-year-old man, crying my eyes out, feeling the love of God come into my heart like I never felt before. And I knew for the first time I was going to be free. For the first time, I knew I was going to be okay. And then I fell for the biggest trap that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell prey to comfortability. Life got good real fast after that fifth step. Back with the wife, back with the kids, work is good, sponsoring a few guys, all that stuff, and I took my foot off the brake. All of a sudden, overtime became more important. All of a sudden, coaching girls basketball became more important. All of a sudden, and not wrong with that stuff, but it overtook my primary purpose of helping the next alkie. And all of a sudden, we hear a lot of times, don't let the life that AA gave you take you away from your AA life. Little by little, I was starting to be pulled away from AA. The way I like to describe it is I live on the ocean. I take the boat on the ocean. Now, if I point that boat east, guess what I'm going to see every day? The curvature of the earth. I'm going to see the sun come up. I'm going to see the whole horizon. It's beautiful where I live. Absolutely gorgeous. Every day it's available to me. But see, what happens to a guy like me is I'm looking that way. What I don't see is my boat is drifting from town to town to town. And I don't see how off the beam I'm getting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'm under the delusion, and I justify it by saying, well, I go to a lot of meetings. I sponsor guys doing some service work. But I have no idea. I want to tell you that I've worked the steps, but the truth of the matter is I've done the first 5 steps, did a few amends, and that's about it. And I think I had a spiritual experience as a result of that. And I try to live on that for the next 5 years of my life. And at 10 years without a drink, I'm restless, irritable, discontent. Again, I'm at that place. You see, I don't know of anyone that's in here right now that got on the spiritual rocket ship and has just kept on going up. That's not my story. My story is I grow, I hit a wall, I grow, I hit a wall. And I hit a wall at 10 years. And see, I'm a coward. And I do things that I'm not truly ashamed of. And I don't even want to mention what I did, but I did. I'm going to tell you because that's the truth. I walked out of my wife into the arms of a woman in AA who understands. I bought the lie. I bought the lie again, and I blew up my life within 3 years because I started to lie to every man in my life. I started to lie to my sponsor. I gave him about 20% of what's going on. I was ashamed. I was filled with guilt. I'm the guy they talk about in the 5th step. I started to live that double life. I'm the guy that builds a beautiful spiritual structure up for me and my family, and I tear it down with a senseless series of sprees. And let me tell you, you don't need to be drinking to blow your life up in Alcoholics Anonymous. Just sponsor some guys. And I blow up my life in AA. And at 13 years without a drink, I almost get arrested again. And I'm given restraining orders because my anger has come back in full force, where I threatened this woman. I was so disgusted with myself, living a double life in Alcoholics Anonymous all over again. How did this happen? And I walked in a bar, 13 years without a drink. Bartender, put a drink on the bar. Boom, puts it right there. I understand what Dr. Bob was talking about when he says he was stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I didn't want that drink, but God damn it, I needed that drink because the pain was so great inside of me. And as the devil and the angel popped out, drink it, don't drink it, drink it. I stood at that I stared at that glass. When all of a sudden a hand went around that glass and pulled it back. And when I looked up, it just happened to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous who was a bartender. What are you doing? Apparently throwing my life away at 13 years without a drink. And I took my tail and I walked out of that bar and I put it between my legs, and I never felt so defeated in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, going to meetings, sponsoring guys, doing service work, justifying all that stuff by my behavior. And what happened was I walked into a meeting about 2 weeks later, and I met my future sponsor who was doing a workshop. And kind of threatened him too. But it's amazing how the ego will come back, because 2 weeks earlier I want to kill myself, and then 2 weeks later I'm in an AA meeting saying, this guy's too good to be true. Are you kidding me? I'm judging him. He seems to be happy, joyous, or free, and I'm like, what's he doing? But Peter becomes my sponsor for the next 17 years of my life. And he basically, with God's help, changes my life. I start to go through the steps again. How many times have we asked the newcomer, are you willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol? And they sit across from you and their head's like a bobblehead doll. Yep. But we never explain what any length really looks like. Well, some of us don't. Well, how many times do we read in our literature? 15, 18, 22 times? When Bill writes, we beg of you to set aside your prejudice, your old ideas about what? Everything. Do we ever explain what old ideas look like? See, I didn't understand that until I started to uncover, discover, and discard the things inside of me. Until I started to take a look at the things that really run my life. You see, my life should look a certain way when it comes to relationships. My life should look a certain way when it comes to work. My life should look a certain way when it comes to my health. My life should look a certain way when it comes to money. My life should look a certain way when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the minute one of those things is not looking the way I think it's supposed to look, that creates every conflict I have. And that will lead to an attitude, and that will lead to an emotion. And it blocks me off from you, and it blocks me off from God. So what I had to start to do is to look at these things on a deeper level. We like to say, peel the onion back a little bit deeper. And I started to peel the onion back a little bit deeper. And what I really found out of that whole exercise is that God's nowhere in my life. I'm agnostic as you could be. Here, God, here's the drink problem, but I'll handle the rest of my life. And as a result of that, I stay sick and suffering in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not a free man. I'm not living in the sunlight of the Spirit. I'm staying in the bondage of Jimmy. But as I started to go through these exercises, I started to go deeper into the inventory, and I started to go deeper into 6 and 7. I started to see things about me that I never knew that were going on. I think many of us walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and we're like a pendulum. One day I like her, the next day I hate her. The one day I love my job, the next day. And I think what 6 and 7 does for guys like us is really to get that pendulum of emotions that just stops swinging so broadly. To get to that place. Bill talks about it as a gift. It's being right-sized. And that's why we can experience emotional sobriety. See, I didn't know what that was. I never experienced emotional sobriety until I started to look at this stuff deeper. What am I willing to stop doing, and what am I willing to start doing to change my life? And am I willing to live on terms other than my own? And do I really bring God into my money? And do I really bring God into my relationship with my wife, or my ex-wife, or my children, or my employers? Do I really bring God into my AA business meeting, home group? Do I really bring God into all aspects of my life? And the truth of the matter is no. Right? None of us adhere to these principles. We're all human beings, as my sponsor would say. And sometimes we lose focus on spiritual things. So I started to understand that I had to get deeper into this stuff. And I had to start looking at some of this stuff. And I'll never forget the consideration that I was given by my sponsor at that time. It's one of the most important things I ever think about when I think about basically everything. He said, Jim, I want you to consider this. Do you look at people, situations, and circumstances in your life through the lens of a character defect or through the eyes of God? How many people have I looked through the lens of a character defect? Anger, jealousy, envy, lust, you name it. Have I ever looked at certain situations in my life with forgiveness and compassion? And if love and tolerance is our code, is it really our code? Am I really practicing our code to the best of my ability? So I had to start waking up to this stuff. I had to start bringing down those walls. My sponsor likes to talk about, most of us drive through life in a tank and all we see is through that little hole. And we're just blowing things out of the way. Do I have a true partnership with God and with another human being? And that's what I had to start looking at. I had to start building bridges with other people. I had to start being more honest with other people. I had to go deeper inside of my soul, because this soul sickness will kill a guy like me. It almost did at 13 years without a drink. So that's what the steps started to do for me. I started to peel it back. And as we know, life happens. Adversity happens. We all have gone through things in this room tonight. I like to talk about my mom. My mom had dementia, real bad. At the age of 90 years old, the doctors came to me and my brothers and sisters and said, your mom needs a knee replacement. Now, my mom was like a Jane Fonda physical fitness, like Katie, and they said, your mom needs a knee replacement. I said, 90 years old, are you kidding me? She's a perfect candidate. She never, other than shooting out 5 kids, she never had a physical problem in her life. So she has the knee replacement. And very quickly after that, because when you put an elderly person like that under anesthesia, they start to lose their memory. So little by little, I became the parent of my parent. I became the parent of my mother. It's one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. My anger was really coming out at times because I wanted to shake her right. I didn't understand dementia. I didn't understand what she was going through. I didn't understand when she would repeat herself over and over or ask me who I was and all that stuff. And by the time she was 94 years old, we couldn't take care of her anymore, so we had to put her in assisted living. Unfortunately, COVID hit. And everyone in the assisted living place got COVID, and my mom died. And I just got my knee replaced. I'll never forget, I was coming out of physical therapy, and the lady said to me, the hospice nurse called me up and said, get here, she's not going to last. And I remember walking to that assisted living place, and I had my moment. The moment I've heard from a million podiums, the moment I've heard from a million AA meetings of how you guys have gotten through certain things with the help of God and each other. Because I walked in there and the nurse, they gave me a test, they put on the PPE, and she said to me, she's not going to be able to open her eyes and she's not going to be able to talk to you, but she'll know you're here. And I'll never forget walking in the room, I said, hi, Mom, and her chest exploded like this, with excitement that her son was there. And then I had that moment, which I heard you guys talk about. And I sat down and I talked about how much I loved her, how much I thanked her for what she did for me. She got me out of every jam possible. It was just powerful. But for the grace of God, I got to be the son that was able to sit with his mom on her last breath. And when I got up, she died about a half hour later. And I was so grateful that I was the one out of my brothers and sisters that God called to be there for her last moments. I'm so grateful that I was the one that was able to hold her hand on her last breaths. See, God was doing for me that day what I could never do for myself. That's where the eyes of God come in, about compassion and love. Because aren't we all here for that? Aren't we all here about love for each other, caring about each other? Yeah, we get into the silly arguments and all that other crap, but isn't it about loving each other for what we do in here? To help that newcomer who's walking in that door tonight, that needs a hand, needs guidance. It's funny, as God takes away something, He puts something else in your life. Because about a couple weeks later, my daughter came to us. She said, I got good news. Me, my wife, and my ex-wife are going to be first-time grandparents in 67 days. So the clock is ticking. And a little baby girl is on her way. So she won't be spoiled, of course, but that's life, isn't it? People leave, people come. People leave, people come. It's a lot like AA. People leave, people come. And God lets us do what we have to do. And to just wrap it up, it's really a miracle over the last 35 years where God has taken me. Sometimes I'm so closed-minded about a lot of things, and sometimes I'm really open-minded, we started a group in my hometown, a big book study meeting. It's my home group today, it'll be 17 years. And we put together a steering committee. We sat in my kitchen and, we hammered out on the anvil of experience like Bill did when he wrote the traditions, of how to get a group and how to start this group. We wanted a 3 legacy group, right? And so we came up with this format, and boom, and then we went to prayer. And we prayed that 30 people would show up on our first night. Well, the first night we had 175 people show up. And we average around 300 people every Sunday night at our home group, 250 to 300 night every Sunday. COVID took a little hit out of us, but it's a pocket of enthusiasm. Pocket of enthusiasm. You walk in another Catholic school cafeteria, you walk in there and you see the two girls over there reading, you see the two guys over there, you see the sponsor, you see the guys, talking about football at the coffee pot. I mean, it's just a place where the spirit of love and Alcoholics Anonymous is alive. So we were a meeting that became a group. And if we were going to be a group, we needed to have a GSR. And they said, Jimmy, why don't you be the GSR? And I'm like, come on, I don't do that service work. Are you kidding me? And why I tell you that is because I was never encouraged to look at service work. When I was 2 years sober, I went to a district meeting and I heard you guys talking about a pamphlet. I'm like, this is politics. I got to get out of here. But 19 years sober, I reluctantly put my hand up to be a GSR. Little did I know the path that God was putting me on. And I wound up going to this Northeast Regional AA Service Assembly in Hunt Valley, Maryland, and my life changed. I met two old-timers who I thought were just old guys like me. One happened to be the United States trustee at large for Alcoholics Anonymous. The other one was the Northeast Regional trustee. He was a bartender and a truck driver. He was the Northeast Regional trustee, and they took me under their wing. And they started to show me that Alcoholics Anonymous is a little bit bigger than just your home group. Though the home group is the heartbeat of AA, there's a lot more in Alcoholics Anonymous that you need to start experiencing. So there's one guy, John, became my service sponsor, because that's what we do. We can't get service sponsor, or can't get some guidance from your sponsor. We have someone who's been down that path, that's all. And so what he did was, the first thing he did was he gave me this thing called the service manual. I don't know how many people in this room have ever looked at that. But he said, I just want you to look at one thing. And he said, turn to page S20. And there's a little excerpt in there. Why do we have a conference? Why do we do the things we do in Alcoholics Anonymous? It was written by a guy by the name of Bernard Smith. He was a Class A non-alcoholic. He was the chairman of the board of the General Service Board. He was Bill Wilson's personal lawyer. And in that little excerpt, what he says is this: we're not here to ensure our own sobriety. We're here. You guys know what to do when that new girl shows up to your home group. Katie knows what to do when that new girl shows up at the home group. Darren knows what to do when the new guy shows up at their home group. Right now, there's somebody in Nashville, Tennessee, I'm sure of it, that's cracking open a bottle of whiskey and can't wait to just drink that whole quart and wash his day away, not knowing that we're in this room right now. Right now, somewhere in New Jersey or Tennessee, there's a single mom who can't wait to put those 3 kids down and take that bottle of wine and wash her day away because of the frustration and anger she might have in her life. Right now, from my house to your house, there's a baby being born destined for alcoholism. So I started to understand something, that as a single member of Alcoholics Anonymous, just an individual, just a guy who's open in his mind about some things that he never knew about, because closed-mindedness will kill us in here. I started to open mind about what this really is, about the responsibility we all have as members of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I got involved. I started to do some committee work. It was a GSR, DCM. I was always encouraged to put my hand up and be available. I became the alternate delegate, or I became the alternate chairperson, then a chair, alternate delegate. And today I stand here with 6 months to go. I have the honor and privilege of serving in Area 44, Northern New Jersey, as the delegate to the General Service Conference. Now, I don't know if she's in here, but it's really important that I tell you this, because I think I am the only one and her that were at the General Service Conference this year. But your delegate for Tennessee and Area 64, Shannon, she did a hell of a job for you guys. If you know her, she's small in stature, but man, don't get in her way. She'll run you right over, that's for sure. And she wasn't afraid to go to the mic, let me tell you. And all she did was carry your voice to that conference. So you should be very proud of the work she does, whether you agree with her or you don't agree with her. So that's what started to happen. I started to do things. Dr. Bob writes something very important in his story. He writes 4 reasons why we give this away. Number 1, it's a pleasure. How many of us in here sit across at a kitchen table from a young girl, a young man, old, young? It doesn't make a difference with the age. But we sit across from someone and we don't see their eyes for maybe 3 months because of the shame, the guilt, and remorse that their experience is like a weight where they can't pick up their head and look you eyeball to eyeball. But as you take them through this process, that day comes when all of a sudden Joe or Mary picks their eyes up and you're like, damn, they got blue eyes. I didn't know that. And it's a pleasure to see that life come. And it's a pleasure to see them get going in their life. And it's a pleasure to see them do the things that you are experiencing yourself, to start families, to get a job, to be sober, to sponsor other women, sponsor other men, to live this life that we have been blessed to live. Dr. Bob talks about a sense of duty. 1965 in Toronto, the responsibility statement came out. I am responsible when anyone, anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA to always be there. For that, we are all responsible. Dr. Bob talks about a third thing. Talks about an insurance policy. It's the great paradox of Alcoholics Anonymous. We give it away to keep it, right? We don't keep our sobriety unless we pass it on. And we all have that to do. And when we do, we don't pick up a drink. It's the ultimate insurance policy against the first drink. It's one drunk helping another. And then Dr. Bob talks about that last thing, a debt. March 28, 1987, that Chevy Impala pulled up. Little did I know that I was stepping into a 1979 Chevy Impala. But really what I was stepping into was a new way of life, or the beginnings of a new way of life. So I owe a debt to those guys. I'll never forget Richie. He passed away with 37 years of sobriety, died of leukemia. Great guy. Bill Grace, the guy that took me through the first, he died 16 years. He picked up a drink, full-blown AIDS. It was a sad thing to say. I've had 5 great sponsors in here, all different types of men, but all great men that love Alcoholics Anonymous. When we celebrate in New Jersey, probably a little different than you guys celebrate down here, we have a 90-day pinning, and then we have a yearly celebrance at our anniversary meetings. And I don't know if you have it down here, but there used to be a 90-day pin. It was a triangle, a gold triangle, had a G on one side, it had an AA on the other side, and there was a dot that was in the middle of that triangle. And what would happen on your 90 days, you would come up to the podium with your sponsor. So I remember 90 days. I'm with Richie. He's standing here. I'm standing right here. My mom and dad were right in front of me. I couldn't believe it. I didn't see them because the smoke back then, you couldn't see anyone from them. I knew what their knees looked like, and so they were sitting down there. But Richie's holding his pin. He says, Jim, and this is what the old timers did to make you really feel good about yourself. See this little insignificant dot? That's you. But I want to make you a promise. If you put one hand in the G, the God, and you put the other hand in AA, and you get involved in the 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous, you'll never have a hand to pick up a drink. So if you're new in here, or you're just coming back, or you're struggling, I got a promise for you. If you put one hand in God, and put one hand in Alcoholics Anonymous, and get involved in these 3 legacies of recovery, unity, and service, you'll never have a hand to pick up a drink. That's all I have. Thank you very much.